South Asia, which is on modern South Asia, which is say 1947 to 1985. And of course the main reason why we are here is because all of you are connected in some way or the other with the things that are behind Ishan and me. Two drawings over there, and this drawing over here, and that photograph over there. All right, that photograph was taken by my father in 1962. This drawing was made in about the same time, 1962, which is a blueprint, and he has hand-colored this with all his hands, and you can see his signature right there. And those two drawings of a city that he made, which he did, his office did, he was supervising and part of the drawing, but most of the detailing on that drawing by a good friend of mine who worked with him, a person called Sandeep Virmani, but it credits to him because it's his office. So what I'm going to try and do for you in about 15 minutes is provide a little context for these drawings and try and set up the importance of this work and this exhibition in general so that you can enjoy it yourself. With me is Ishan Kumar, the one person.
Yeah,
The one and only, the one person who has read the entire book that I wrote on your grandfather, uncle, niece, relative, etc., etc.
Is that really true, Ishan?
Yeah, I read the whole thing. Except for, sorry, I didn't read the last little bit, which is his interpretation. But everything else is great.
I sent a copy of it. We have a copy.
Everyone should over here have a copy of it. If you don't have a copy of it, I will make sure you get
I
it.
will say it is very well done. It is a very well done book. I highly recommend giving it a read
Excellent.
if you want to know about his life.
So I am going to provide broad context and story, and Ishan's going to embellish and add with personal detail of things that are really important. Okay? So, why this show? And why this time period? 1947 to 1985 can roughly be said to be the period when South Asian nations became independent and tried and worked hard to bootstrap nation building. Right? This was an important project led by people like Nehru. And the objective of pretty much all the work that you're going to see over here, including this over here, was not personal fame or, a signature architecture building of the kind you see today. All of it was dedicated to nation building. And nation building under conditions of extreme difficulty. Political difficulty, and of course economic limitedness. Nevertheless, this project can be described as a project of high ambition. This is not a project which is, like as in the slums or something else where you're trying to do maximum, just trying to get by. This is all an architecture designed to do something very significant in spite of all the context that was available. And the reason for that was that India and entire South Asia, not exactly at the same time, but more or less South Asia, had just come out of colonization, where the important thing is not colonization. The important thing is that in the period of colonization from roughly 1800 to 1950 was the period of industrialization. All right, that's the important thing, not colonization. And so if the world's wealth before industrialization basically is a graph that goes like this with slides up and down, 1800 onwards the graph goes like this. And we are still riding that graph, economic graph. So for that critical period, when the world exploded, the colonies like South Asia did benefited asymmetrically from that. Most of the benefit accrued to the West. While they relied, particularly England, relied on the colonies for raw materials. So when India became independent, the complete effort was to say, we're going to make up for lost time. And that was the focus. And not only are we going to make up for lost time, we're going to do it better. We're going to not make the mistakes that were made along this long journey that the West took. For instance, industrialization produced massive pollution and destroyed Western cities. You look at Charles Dickens, you read Charles Dickens in the 19th century, London was a horrible place. So the West paid a huge price for industrialization. So the effort of doing this work was to catch up, but leapfrog and try and get it. So now you get the context for great ambition in spite of the economic limitations. So when you look around, that's what you want to see. You don't want to see, the Western, Eastern, you want to see a nation, series of nations trying to make this work. You want to add something? No? Okay.
All I know is about his life, how he fits.
So, my father, your relative, somewhere you're connected to you, fits into this because he was in UK in 1947, the year India got independence. 1952, he returned to India. Louder? People will complain. Get closer. Okay, no, because I'm not. He returned to India. He could have stayed on. He had a good job. In fact, he had a partner he probably wanted to live with. He left all that behind expressly to come and join the project of nation building. And he joined the team that was building Chandigarh.
All right. Did you want to talk about his early real quick before then?
His what?
Early life?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I mean, his mom died when he was
12.
12.
Yeah.
And he basically grew up on a farm around a lot of animals. And so you'll see that later in his work. And then like Kakwama said, he basically went to college in the UK and then immediately joined this team as an intern. So it wasn't like, I originally thought it was like later in his life, and he was like the bottom of the bottom for this project. But he was doing it like, I mean, you can explain why he was brought in.
Well, so there were four European architects who were leading the team, and there was a team of 8 Indian architects and planners who joined the first wave of the team, and he was in that, and then they expanded the office and a lot of people joined, including Ira's and Ishan's, who have just joined us, their grandfather. Mr. Kohli also joined the very same project. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day.
Ascension.
You got it kicked out already?
He was trying. So that's what was I saying?
How he joined the team. And he was early, it was like 8.
Team of
and
8 to start with, all
and
the other
then
people joined
their
afterwards.
grandfather.
Oh, yeah. So that they built the team to build the city, but more importantly, to develop expertise, to be able to reproduce this and adapt it as they went on. So that's why right after independence, his drawings come the first, because he belonged to that first generation. And then the rest of the exhibit is taking the project that was kick-started over here and trying to rethink it and rethink it and rethink it and find different ways of adapting modernism to the site conditions and things that people were learning. So you'll see a lot of other architects who are considered like second generation. Everyone in this room knew my father, and they saw him as one of the the elder people But of course, a lot of these people were like, well, you guys did good, but we can do better. And there was a lot of back and forth and argument and discussion. One that I will remember also, most of these people have been to our house in our living room. Charles Correa, Doshi, all the big people, Raj Raval over here, they would all come to our house, and we remember cigarettes, alcohol, and vociferous argument on how India should be done.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So was he, Mr. Prakash, trying to merge past, present and future together, all three? Past with the present, present with the future?
Something like that. Yeah. So let me come to that part. So these come from that first part when he was building Chandigarh. After this first period, in the 1960s, he moved to Ludhiana, another town, to build a series of universities, which were part of the Kennedy exchange, whatever. And then he decided that the way India had built had real problems, which is in particular that it was a white elephant, it was non-productive, it was economically unsustainable, and most importantly, he felt it was environmentally expensive. It was a pure consumer city. So he said, how do you build a city that is self-sustaining, fully sustainable? And so we started imagining how to do Chandigarh 2.0. And that's what those drawings are about. And overall, as you go through the exhibition, the thing to see is every project works very, very, very hard to produce conditions of comfort and living without the use of air conditioning or any kind of mechanical ventilation. And the important thing over here is not they were doing all this because they felt there was an energy crisis. In the 50s, 60s, and even until the early 70s, we thought energy was limitless and that we would just, there would be no problem. All this was done because the conditions of production, there were no resources to produce air conditioning. So I have described, many people have described this architecture as sustainable and environmental before sustainability was a thing. But the important thing to remember is it was economically driven. So the message in literature now is that if we want to think about environmentalism and sustainability, we should perhaps not be thinking of high-tech buildings and louvers driven by big data, but we really need to re-examine our relationship to consumption and growth. So that's one of the big important messages that come out of this. The second important thing about this exhibition in general is usually these kind of exhibitions are focused on big names. Who are the celebrity architects? The curators have made a huge effort, like including people like him, finding out their drawings, finding archives, looking in people's home drawers and finding information to make sure it's a full representative example, which includes at least 5 women architects who were practicing in this situation. We're talking 1950s and 60s. We're not talking 90s and 2000s. We're talking 50s and 60s in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. And as you look around, look for the diversity that they have tried to put together, which is absolutely amazing to see that happen. So those are the two sort of things I would recommend. The third thing, last thing, and after that we can Ishan can talk and we can go questions, is look for the handmade drawing. There is not a single computer output anymore. Now the question you want to ask yourself as you're looking for this drawing is, well, we could just have made it by a computer. It would have been simpler and better and faster. And in some cases, many cases, that was probably true. But in many cases, what you find in the drawing is an effort. You see, the building will be very simple, but the drawing will be so beautifully rendered with a high degree of complexity. And you're wondering why? why waste the time, energy, effort? And what you have to try and see is they're trying to put into the drawing an aspirational vision which is only partially understood, which they're trying to work out, which is much bigger than communicating what is necessary for the building to be made. So they're actually making these drawings to talk to each other, to talk amongst architects and say, well, you know, you saw my building, but this is what I was trying to do. What do you think? And the other person will say, it should be like this. And that's what you want to try and see.
That was great.
So I ask you another question.
Yes.
So like, people are emotionally connected with each other. Like we are in presence, we affect each other. You think buildings have the same effect? They affect each other and also the human being while you go around them or in them?
Buildings are alive. But wait, I want Ishan to tell some more interesting details about the man.
Yeah, so I just know about him from the book, and basically, like I said, his mom died when he was very young. He was really into farming and animals. I thought it was interesting that he basically went to college and then immediately got recruited to this team. So basically all these huge name architects like Korb and stuff like that. And I think it was Nehru wanted like also like local Indians and stuff. So that's why they hired these interns. And they basically got to work directly with these like amazing architects early in their career. And so I just see how it shaped his life a lot, because he basically just started thinking really big about everything. And because he got to basically help design the city of Chandigarh with them, which was really cool. And so then, yeah, like Kakwama said, he went to Ludhiana and he designed College of Agriculture University. And there is where he just kind of did, like, he did a lot of architecture, but he also explored art. He has like he has a cement sculpture he worked on, a couple cement ones at that metal. He did a lot of photography. Obviously, that's where he started getting into drawing and painting. So that was cool. And then later in his life, it was later, right? Or was it during that time? Was the whole linear
After
city?
that, 70s
Yeah, after that. So after he kind of all had this career and stuff, that's when he was like, I want to, you know, keep creating and thinking of these ideas, or maybe it was still already happening at that same time. And that's where this came in, which was like his big grand vision. And it was really interesting and cool. Like he was trying to separate, basically make the city not have any cars, like move all the cars up above all the, you know, pedestrian. So he wanted it all to be like, you know, in that picture, like, you know, residential, like you have just people access, like he wanted to bring the animals there, right, and have that be right in the city rather than being outside, like rural and urban. He wanted to combine it in the same spot.
If there was 100% what we call today composting, 100% recycling of energy, and food production, local sustainable food production in the neighborhood. So all these ideas on different terms are all in there. Okay, last thing.
One more thing. Why don't you just mention the full circle of how each of these grandkids eventually got to paint in his painting studio.
Yep.
They all have their fingerprints on the wall, even still today. I don't think it's been painted
It's all
over.
there. It's all there.
Well, nice job, yeah. I'm the only one that didn't get it.
Yeah.
Everybody else.
And the house is being sold, but it's being sold to an architect who is going to preserve all this.
And a friend.
And a friend. So, last thing I want to say is, unstatedly, of course, this whole exhibition has a political agenda. All right? It is taking aim at contemporary neo-nationalist India. All this architecture and all this thinking is considered bad in India today. Nehru is a bad person. He's completely screwed the country, if you ask Narendra Modi and all his friends. And they think India should be a Hindu nationalist, you know, going back to its roots, rather than making, you know, this kind of modernism and trying to do that kind of work. All right? So that's clearly a political agenda. including the whole city of cities. Like all these cities are designed with thinking, what we were talking about earlier, with social strategy. How should people live? All cities today are built in India, everywhere, including India, as real estate propositions. How can you return maximum ROI? So that's a critique, and a number of the buildings being shown over here are either already been destroyed or are set up to be destroyed. And since they are not minimum 100 years old, they cannot even be entered into preservation in all of South Asia. So they are not even eligible to be discussed for preservation, and they are being destroyed, including 2 of Nanaji's buildings have been destroyed. A third one is set up to be destroyed. All his gas stations have been destroyed. Chandigarh, everything is being leveled and being replaced by what is called, famously, world-class architecture, which is cut-pasted from Singapore and preferably Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley architecture is nothing to brag about.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So, but that's what it is. Okay, I think
Thank
we
you.
have taken enough time.
Thank you.
Please enjoy the exhibition. Available for questions and discussions anytime you want.
That was cool.